I'm Miriam, 32, and I've always tried to be the daughter my father could be proud of. Straight A's, debate team captain scholarship offers. Yet despite my achievements, I never seemed to measure up in his eyes. What I didn't know was how far his favoritism would go until that summer day when I discovered he was paying every cent of my cousin's college tuition while telling me he couldn't help with mine. That moment changed everything I thought I knew about family fairness and my own worth. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if family financial favoritism has touched your life, hit subscribe to join our community of sharing and healing. Growing up in our modest colonial home in Allentown, Pennsylvania, I never questioned that I was loved. Until my parents divorced when I was 12, our family life seemed relatively normal. Dad worked long hours at his insurance firm, while Mom balanced part-time nursing with managing our household. The fracture in our family foundation happened gradually, then suddenly, with Dad moving out on a rainy Tuesday afternoon while I was at school. In the aftermath, I noticed how often Dad would visit his sister Caroline and her family just 20 minutes away. My Aunt Caroline had married well, her husband Thomas came from old money, but they presented themselves as self-made. Their daughter Jessica was my age, and from early on there was something about their relationship that made me uneasy. "Your cousin Jessica has such natural grace," Dad would comment after family gatherings, though he rarely mentioned my debate tournaments or academic awards. Jessica was pretty and popular, but struggled academically while I maintained a 4.0 GPA despite working weekends at the local bookstore. Mom tried to compensate for Dad's emotional distance. "Your father loves you," she would insist after he missed another school event. "He just doesn't know how to show it." I wanted to believe her, but the evidence suggested otherwise, especially when Dad never missed Jessica's dance recitals or soccer games. Mrs. Harmon, my English teacher, became an unexpected source of support during my junior year. She stayed after school to help me prepare college application essays and wrote glowing recommendation letters. "You have a gift, Miriam," she told me one afternoon. "Your writing speaks truth to power in ways most adults are afraid to do." At our extended family's Thanksgiving dinner, my senior year, the contrast between how Dad treated Jessica and me became painfully apparent. He asked detailed questions about her college plans, though her grades were barely above passing. When I mentioned my interest in Northwestern's journalism program, he nodded absently before turning back to Jessica. "Did you try talking to him about how you feel?" Mom asked later that night as we drove home in silence. "What's the point?" I replied, watching raindrops race down the passenger window. "He's made it clear who matters more." I tried countless times to connect with my father. When I discovered he enjoyed photography, I took a semester-long photography class and invited him to my exhibition. He came 40 minutes late, stayed for 15 minutes, then left early for dinner with Aunt Caroline and Jessica. I stopped trying after that. The summer after junior year, I worked double shifts at Horizon Books, adding assistant manager to my resume, while saving every possible dollar for college. My coworker Tara noticed how exhausted I was staying, until closing, then studying until midnight. "College isn't going anywhere," she said, sliding a coffee across the break room table. "You're burning yourself out." "I don't have a choice," I replied. "Dad makes good money, but says he can't help with tuition. Mom's already working overtime to help. Unless I want crushing student debt, this is my reality." What I didn't say was how the rejection hurt more than the financial burden. Every declined dinner invitation and missed school event sent the same message: I wasn't worth his time or resources. The family dynamics were complicated by my grandmother, who saw everything but said little. At her birthday dinner, she pulled me aside and pressed a check into my hand. "For your education," she whispered. "I wish it could be more." I later learned she'd done the same for Jessica, though Jessica didn't need the help. By graduation, the pattern was undeniable. Dad attended the ceremony but left before I received my honors, claiming a work emergency. That night, scrolling through social media, I saw he'd posted pictures at Jessica's house, celebrating her acceptance to Princeton, with a caption about family pride that stung like salt in an open wound. My final year of high school brought the excitement and anxiety of college applications. Each evening after work, I'd sit at our kitchen table surrounded by brochures and application forms, determined to create opportunities through sheer force of will. Mom would bring me tea, offering encouragement and practical advice, but we both felt the absence of Dad's support. Northwestern's journalism program is incredibly competitive, the guidance counselor warned during our meeting. But your writing samples and academic record are exceptional. I think you have a real shot. I applied to 7 universities ranging from dream schools to practical options. Each application represented hours of essay writing, form filling, and hope. When acceptance letters started arriving, each one felt like validation, that my hard work meant something, even if my father couldn't see it. The Northwestern acceptance arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I called Mom at work, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read the letter. She cried, promised a celebration dinner, and asked if I'd told Dad. Not yet, I answered, my excitement dimming slightly. I'll call him now. Dad's response was predictably underwhelming. That's nice, Miriam. Isn't Northwestern very expensive, though? Maybe consider state instead. No congratulations, no pride, just immediate discouragement. The financial aid package from Northwestern covered about 60% of the costs. Even with my savings and potential work study, there was a significant gap. The financial aid counselor suggested a family conversation about contributions. Most students have some family support, she explained gently. Even a few $1,000s can make the difference. I arranged dinner with Dad at Marcello's, his favorite Italian restaurant, hoping the setting might soften him for the conversation ahead. I prepared a detailed breakdown of cost scholarships and the remaining gap, along with a proposal for how I could maximize work hours and minimize expenses. I can't swing it, Miriam, he said, barely glancing at my carefully prepared documents. Business has been slow, and there are other expenses you don't know about. What expenses? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Your house is paid off, you have no debt, and you just bought a new car. That's my business, he replied, his tone closing the subject. You've always been independent. Take out loans if you need to, or choose a more affordable option. Each dismissal chipped away at my confidence, making me question if my dreams were merely delusions of grandeur. Perhaps Northwestern was unrealistic. Perhaps journalism was impractical. Perhaps I should settle for less, as Dad clearly expected me to. My part-time job at Horizon Books became my sanctuary. Surrounded by stories of people overcoming obstacles, I found solace and determination. My manager noticed my dedication and increased my hours, allowing me to save more for tuition. Tara, now promoted to assistant manager, became my strongest advocate. Your father's limitations shouldn't define your future, she said one closing shift as we counted the register. My mom didn't support my college dreams either. Now I'm 2 semesters from my business degree, and I'm doing it on my own terms. The deposit deadline for Northwestern loomed like a storm cloud. Each day brought increasing anxiety as I juggled final exam scholarship applications and additional work hours. Mom offered her savings, but it wasn't enough, and I refused to let her compromise her own financial security. Maybe defer for a year, she suggested one night. Work full-time, save more money, and try again next fall. What if nothing changes in a year? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if I never have enough? Northwestern represented more than education. It symbolized escape from a family dynamic, where I was perpetually second-best a chance to prove my worth, in a world where my achievements might actually matter. The acceptance celebration Mom planned was modest but meaningful. My closest friends came over for homemade lasagna and grocery store cake. Dad was invited, but texted last minute about a client emergency. I pretended not to care, but everyone noticed his empty chair. Later that week, I received a partial scholarship from the local press association for promising journalism students. It wasn't enough to close the Northwestern gap, but the recognition validated my aspirations. The award letter mentioned exceptional talent and determination, words I desperately needed to hear. As May approached, my anxiety peaked. The decision deadline was 1 week away, and I still hadn't committed to Northwestern or my safety school Penn State, which offered more financial aid but a less prestigious journalism program. Every night I calculated and recalculated numbers, looking for a financial miracle that never materialized. Whatever you decide, Mrs. Harmon told me during our final meeting, your talent will find its path. Sometimes the journey takes unexpected turns, but that doesn't mean you won't reach your destination. Her words provided comfort, but didn't solve the practical problems. The night before the deadline, I sat alone in my bedroom. Acceptance letters spread before me, trying to choose between dreams and reality. Grandmother's 75th birthday celebration was held at Aunt Caroline's sprawling Tudor-style home in the affluent part of town. The contrast between their lifestyle and ours had never bothered me until that day. Crystal chandeliers catered food and professionally arranged flowers decorated spaces rarely used by actual family members. Dad arrived early to help set up something he never offered for events at our house. I watched him laugh with Uncle Thomas, their camaraderie highlighting his absence in my daily life. Mom squeezed my hand, sensing my discomfort, but unable to fix the underlying issue. The family gathered in the sunroom for appetizers, conversation flowing around college plans and summer activities. Jessica entered late, making what felt like a calculated entrance in a new designer dress. She hugged grandmother, then immediately commanded the room's attention. "I have exciting news," she announced, her voice pitched to Carrie. "I just confirmed my housing assignment at Princeton. I'm in the newest dorm with an amazing view of campus." Congratulations echoed around the room while I forced a smile. Princeton had been Jessica's second choice, but her grades and test scores hadn't qualified for her first choice, Yale. Still, the Ivy League status was all that mattered to the family. "We're so proud," Aunt Caroline beamed. "The Princeton legacy continues." Uncle Thomas nodded. "Worth every penny of that tuition." Jessica laughed, then delivered the sentence that would change everything. "And thank goodness Uncle Peter is such a lifesaver with tuition. Princeton isn't cheap even with alumni connections." The room didn't immediately register the significance, but Mom's sharp intake of breath beside me confirmed I hadn't misheard. Dad was paying for Jessica's education at Princeton, while claiming he couldn't help with mine. Time seemed to slow as I processed this revelation. The appetizer in my hand suddenly tasted like cardboard. Conversations continued around me, but the words blurred into meaningless noise. I needed to escape before my composure cracked completely. "Excuse me," I murmured, placing my plate on a side table and walking as normally as possible toward the hallway bathroom. Once inside, I locked the door and sank to the floor, my back against the cool marble vanity. Tears came silently at first. Then in gasping sobs, I muffled with a hand towel. The betrayal was worse than I'd imagined. It wasn't that Dad couldn't help me, he simply chose not to. A soft knock interrupted my breakdown. "Miriam, are you okay?" It was Alex, Jessica's younger brother, and the only cousin who seemed uncomfortable with the family's preferential treatment. I opened the door slightly, knowing my red eyes betrayed me. Alex slipped inside, locking the door behind him. "I heard what Jessica said," he whispered, sitting beside me on the bathroom floor, his formal clothes incongruous with our positions. "I'm sorry." "Did you know?" I asked, needing truth from someone. Alex nodded reluctantly. "Dad and Uncle Peter set it up years ago. Something about a business arrangement and family responsibility. I overheard them talking last Christmas." Years ago. The timeline struck me with fresh pain. While I'd been working weekends and applying for scholarships, Dad had already committed to funding Jessica's education, regardless of where she attended or what she studied. Why her and not me? The question escaped before I could contain it. Alex shrugged, his 14-year-old perspective surprisingly insightful. "Adults are weird about favoritism. They pretend it doesn't exist while making it super obvious." Returning to the party required strength I wasn't sure I possessed, but hiding in the bathroom indefinitely wasn't an option. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied minimal makeup, and practiced a neutral expression in the mirror. Back in the sunroom, I observed Dad with new awareness. He stood proudly beside Jessica as she showed him Princeton brochures on her phone. His animated responses and genuine interest were behaviors I'd spent years trying to elicit without success. "We should leave," Mom whispered when I rejoined her. Her face reflected my pain, adding maternal anger to the mix. "After cake," I insisted. "I won't give them the satisfaction of a dramatic exit." The rest of the party passed in a blur. I went through motions of celebration, singing happy birthday and serving cake to relatives who remained oblivious to my distress. Grandmother watched me with knowing eyes but said nothing, her own complicated relationship with her son perhaps giving her insight into my situation. The car ride home with Mom was initially silent, both of us processing what we'd learned. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I had no idea, Miriam. I swear on my life I didn't know he was paying for Jessica." "I believe you," I said, watching streetlights illuminate her profile in rhythmic flashes. "Would it have changed anything if you had known everything?" she replied firmly. "I would have confronted him, demanded equal treatment for you, possibly even taken legal action. The divorce agreement included provisions for your education." Another betrayal layered upon the first. Dad had potentially violated legal obligations, not just moral ones. That night, sleep eluded me. I stared at my ceiling, replaying years of interactions with new context. Every excuse, every missed event, every dismissal of my achievements took on darker significance. The Northwestern decision deadline loomed just 3 days away, and now I understood clearly that no financial rescue was coming. Beyond the practical implications, the emotional damage felt insurmountable. If my own father valued me so little, how could I trust anyone? What deficiency did he see in me that justified such blatant favoritism? These questions circled like vultures, picking at my self-worth, until dawn broke, finding me exhausted, but resolved to confront him directly. The following Saturday, I met Dad at Westside Diner, our occasional meeting spot when he remembered our scheduled visitations. I arrived early, claiming a booth by the window and ordering coffee I couldn't taste. When he walked in 10 minutes late, his casual demeanor suggested he had no idea what was coming. "Sorry about the time," he said, sliding into the booth. "Traffic was worse than expected." Small talk about weather and his work filled the first awkward minutes while I gathered courage. Finally, during a lull in conversation, I placed my hands flat on the table and looked directly at him. "I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Are you paying for Jessica's tuition at Princeton?" His expression shifted from surprise to defensiveness so quickly it confirmed the truth before he spoke. "Where did you hear that?" "Jessica announced it at Grandmother's birthday party. She seemed to think everyone already knew." Dad sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's complicated, Miriam. There are business arrangements between Thomas and me that you don't understand." "Then explain them to me," I challenged. "Help me understand why you can fund her Ivy League education while telling me you can't contribute anything to mine." "It's not that simple," he countered, irritation creeping into his voice. "Jessica needed the help. Her grades weren't scholarship material, and Caroline and Thomas have appearances to maintain." The implication was clear and devastating. "So, because I worked harder and earned scholarships, I deserve less support. You're punishing me for being self-sufficient." "That's not fair," Dad protested, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "You've always been independent, capable of figuring things out. Jessica needs more guidance and support." "I was independent because I had to be," I replied, my voice rising slightly. "Not because I wanted to navigate everything alone." Dad shifted uncomfortably, then attempted to minimize the situation. "Look, you're making too much of this. Jessica's situation is different." "How? We're both your family. The only difference is she's your niece and I'm your daughter. Shouldn't that count for more, not less?" His face hardened. "You're being dramatic. I've always supported you." "With what when?" I demanded, years of hurt surfacing. "You miss my debate championships, my graduation honors, even my photography exhibit that I specifically created to connect with you. You've barely been present in my life, much less supportive." "That's not true," he countered defensively. "I paid child support. I attended your graduation. You left before I received my honors. And child support was your legal obligation, not some generous gift." Dad's expression darkened as he leaned forward. "This is exactly why it's difficult to help you. Everything turns into criticism and arguments. Jessica appreciates what she's given." The injustice of his statement struck me physically like a slap. I would have appreciated help with college too if it had ever been offered. Instead, you lied about your financial situation while secretly funding her education. "I never lied," he insisted, though his gaze shifted away. "Lies of omission are still lies," I said, my voice breaking slightly. You let me believe you couldn't afford to help when you simply chose not to. The conversation deteriorated as Dad brought up unrelated past disagreements, a classic deflection tactic. When he mentioned my attitude problem as a teenager, the unfairness overwhelmed me. My attitude problem? I was working weekends while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, and you think I had an attitude problem for occasionally being tired. Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. This isn't about my teenage behavior. It's about your consistent choice to prioritize Jessica over your own daughter. You're twisting everything, he insisted, growing visibly agitated. Caroline and Thomas have been there for me in ways you wouldn't understand. And I haven't been there because you never let me in. You created a self-fulfilling prophecy, pushing me away, then using my distance as justification for more rejection. The waitress approached with coffee refills, then quickly retreated, sensing the tension. Dad used the interruption to check his watch. I need to wrap this up. I have appointments this afternoon. The casual dismissal was too much. I stood grabbing my purse with shaking hands. Of course you do. Something more important than addressing the fact that you've betrayed your daughter's trust and abandoned your parental responsibilities. Miriam, you're overreacting, he called as I walked toward the door. I turned back briefly, allowing him to see the tears I could no longer contain. No, Dad. For the first time, I'm seeing things exactly as they are. Outside, the spring sunshine felt mockingly bright. I walked 2 blocks before collapsing onto a park bench, my body shaking with suppressed sobs. When my phone rang, I answered without checking caller ID, momentarily hoping Dad was calling to apologize. Miriam, are you okay? Tara's voice came through instead. You sound awful. I confronted my dad. I managed between shaky breaths. About paying for Jessica's college, but not mine. It went worse than I expected. Where are you? I'm picking you up, she said firmly. 20 minutes later, Tara's battered Honda pulled alongside the park. She didn't ask questions immediately, just drove to her apartment and made tea while I collected myself. When I finally explained everything, her outrage provided the validation I desperately needed. That's beyond favoritism, she declared. It's emotional abandonment. That night, sleep again proved elusive. I replayed the confrontation, imagining different outcomes, and wondering if any approach could have broken through his defenses. By morning, I'd reached an uncomfortable conclusion: Dad's behavior wouldn't change, because he didn't see it as problematic. His reality was so different from mine that meaningful reconciliation seemed impossible. The revelation brought unexpected clarity. If Dad's support wasn't coming, I needed to make decisions based on that reality rather than false hope. It hurt, but the truth, however painful, provided a foundation for moving forward that false expectations never could. The weeks following my confrontation with Dad brought a heaviness that colored everything gray. I went through motions of daily life, my academic success suddenly feeling hollow, without the parental recognition I'd unconsciously been seeking. Mom noticed my withdrawal, but struggled to help her own anger at Dad's betrayal, creating additional tension. I spoke to a lawyer friend, she told me one evening. The divorce agreement technically includes college support. We could potentially file for enforcement. The idea of legal action against my own father, however justified, felt like admitting complete familial breakdown. And drag everything through court, make it even more adversarial. It might be the only way to get what you deserve, she argued. Or it might cost more in legal fees and emotional damage than it's worth. I countered, exhaustion evident in my voice. I need to accept that Dad's help isn't coming and make decisions accordingly. The deadline for Northwestern passed with painful finality as I declined their offer, unable to bridge the financial gap. Instead, I accepted admission to Pennsylvania State University, with its more substantial financial aid package and proximity to home, allowing me to live with Mom and save on housing costs. Mrs. Harmon's disappointment matched my own when I shared the news. Northwestern would have been perfect for your writing style, she lamented, then quickly adjusted her response. But Penn State has an excellent journalism program too. The important thing is to keep writing wherever you are. Her practical support extended beyond encouragement. She connected me with 2 Penn State alumni who had established careers in journalism, creating a potential mentorship network before I even began classes. Their email exchanges provided rare bright spots during those difficult weeks. Family gatherings became exercises in emotional endurance. Dad attempted to act as if our confrontation had never happened, greeting me with superficial cheerfulness at a cousin's birthday party. I responded with minimal politeness, unwilling to perpetuate the fiction of normal family relations. Jessica remained oblivious to the underlying tension, chattering about Princeton orientation and dorm room decorations. "You should visit campus this fall," she suggested during one particularly tone-deaf conversation. "We could do a cousin weekend. I'll be busy with my own classes," I replied neutrally, unwilling to explain that visiting her dad-funded Ivy League experience was the last thing I wanted. Aunt Caroline's subtle digs proved harder to ignore. "Miriam, didn't you apply for the Fulton Scholarship? Jessica's friend Madison received it. Such a shame you missed that opportunity." The implication that insufficient effort rather than systemic disadvantage explained my situation burned like acid. "I applied for 27 scholarships and received 4. I responded, forcing pleasantness into my tone. "Unfortunately, they don't all cover Princeton-level tuition." Grandmother surprised me during these difficult family functions, her quiet observations clearly registering the undercurrents most pretended not to see. During a July barbecue, she maneuvered us into a private conversation on the screened porch, her aged hands covering mine with surprising strength. "Family patterns repeat unless someone has the courage to break them," she said without preamble. "My own father favored my brother similarly, despite my academic achievements." The revelation of this generational pattern provided context, if not comfort. "Did it ever get better?" I asked, desperate for hope. Her sad smile answered before her words. "Not with him. I had to find validation elsewhere and build my own sense of worth. My greatest regret is that Peter continued the cycle despite experiencing its harms secondhand through me." "I don't understand how he can't see what he's doing," I confessed. "Some blindness is willful," Grandmother replied. "Acknowledging his behavior would require changing it, and change is difficult, especially when it threatens established family dynamics." These insights helped intellectually, but couldn't heal the emotional wounds. The summer became a blur of extra work shifts, scholarship applications for the upcoming semester, and emotional processing that left little energy for anything else. My friendship with Devin, a sophomore journalism major I met during freshman orientation, provided unexpected perspective. After hearing abbreviated versions of my family situation, he shared his own experience with parental disappointment. "My father wanted a business major, not a journalist," he explained during a campus tour. "He sees my career choice as a rejection of his values rather than an expression of my own." "How do you handle that?" I asked, recognizing parallel elements despite our different circumstances. "I stopped trying to change his mind and focused on becoming so good at journalism that my success speaks for itself," he replied. "You can't control his behavior, only your response to it." This pragmatic approach resonated with me. While I couldn't force Dad to treat me fairly or acknowledge his preferential treatment, I could channel my hurt into determination. The first semester brought expected challenges, adjusting to college academics, balancing work and studies, and navigating new social dynamics. But these normal difficulties were compounded by my ongoing emotional processing and financial stress. When other students complained about parental expectations, I remained silent, unable to explain that parental indifference could hurt even more than excessive involvement. Small victories sustained me during this difficult transition. My first college newspaper article received editorial praise. A particularly challenging English assignment earned the professor's highest mark. Each accomplishment became a private affirmation that my worth existed independently from Dad's recognition. January found me sitting in my dorm room staring at a bank statement showing my depleted savings. Despite scholarships and part-time work, financial anxiety remained a constant companion. The statement represented more than money. It symbolized the concrete reality of Dad's abandonment. Something shifted inside me as I studied those numbers, anger crystallizing into determination. "I'm done waiting for his validation," I whispered to my empty room. The declaration felt like releasing a heavy burden I'd carried since childhood. The following day, I scheduled a meeting with my academic advisor, Dr. Reynolds, ostensibly to discuss course selections, but really seeking guidance on career acceleration. I need to distinguish myself quickly, I explained, not just academically but professionally. What opportunities should I be targeting now? Dr. Reynolds studied me thoughtfully before answering. The Tribune internship applications open next month. It's highly competitive, usually filled by juniors and seniors, often from Ivy League schools. But your writing samples are exceptional, and your hunger would impress them. The prestigious news outlet internship seems simultaneously perfect and impossible. You think I could actually compete against Ivy League upperclassmen? I think your life experiences give your writing an authenticity many privileged students lack, she replied. Raw talent combined with personal insight is powerful. With Dr. Reynolds' encouragement, I began preparing my application, spending hours perfecting writing samples and crafting a personal statement that conveyed determination without mentioning family difficulties. Devin reviewed my materials, offering valuable feedback from his experience with similar applications. Your investigative piece on student food insecurity needs to be your lead sample, he advised. It shows both technical skill and empathetic reporting. Tara contributed practical support during phone calls, helping me prepare for the inevitable interview questions about handling pressure and meeting deadlines. Talk about balancing academics with work experience, she suggested. It demonstrates responsibility and time management. The interview invitation arrived unexpectedly early, giving me just 1 week to prepare. Panic threatened initially, but years of self-reliance had built resilience I hadn't fully recognized. I researched the publication, thoroughly practiced responses to potential questions, and assembled a professional outfit from thrift store components that mimicked designer styles. The interview panel consisted of 3 editors with intimidating credentials. Their questions probed my experience, journalistic ethics, and ability to handle sensitive stories. When one editor mentioned my non-traditional background, I recognized an opportunity. My experiences navigating financial independence have taught me to question surface narratives and look for underlying systemic factors. I explained, everyone has a story beyond what's immediately visible. Good journalism reveals those hidden dimensions. 2 anxious weeks later, the acceptance email arrived. I read it 3 times before believing it was real, then immediately called Mom, who screamed with excitement on the other end of the line. I knew you could do it, she said, pride evident in her voice. This is huge, Miriam. Dad's reaction when I mentioned the internship during our monthly obligatory phone call was predictably underwhelming. Internships don't pay much, do they? He commented. Make sure it doesn't interfere with your paid work hours. His response, once devastating, now seemed merely sad. His inability to celebrate my achievements reflected his limitations, not mine. With renewed confidence, I created a detailed financial independence plan. Meeting with the financial aid office revealed additional grant possibilities for sophomore year. The internship, while modestly compensated, provided academic credit that reduced my required course load, allowing more work hours without sacrificing grades. My role at the student newspaper expanded from staff writer to features editor, providing valuable management experience. The Regional Collegiate Press Association awarded my investigative series on food insecurity first place in its category, bringing unexpected recognition from professors and peers. The experience of writing about others' struggles while processing my own led to a cathartic personal essay about family financial abandonment. Published anonymously in a national online magazine, the piece resonated widely, generating thousands of comments from students in similar situations. This unexpected visibility led to an interview request from a regional television news program doing a special on college financing challenges. With my identity concealed for privacy, I shared my experience emphasizing systemic issues rather than personal grievances. The segment generated significant social media discussion about parental obligations and college affordability. Jessica reached out shortly after the television interview, aired her message suggesting she'd recognize details despite the anonymity. Was that you on Channel 7 last night? Her text read. The story sounded familiar. After consideration, I invited her for coffee, unsure if honest conversation was possible given our complicated family dynamic. We met at a campus cafe, initial awkwardness eventually yielding to surprising candor. I had no idea Uncle Peter refused to help with your college, she admitted, genuine distress in her expression. I always assumed you had the same support I did. That was precisely the fiction everyone maintained, I explained without bitterness. The narrative that everything was equal and fair when it wasn't. Jessica's subsequent offer to help financially came from good intentions, but misunderstood the fundamental issue. I could share some of what Uncle Peter provides, she suggested. It's not fair that I have everything covered while you're struggling. I declined gently but firmly. This isn't about money anymore. It's about recognizing patterns and choosing different paths forward. But thank you for understanding. Our conversation didn't magically repair family dynamics, but it removed Jessica from the list of people I resented. She was another pawn in Dad's complicated emotional game, not my adversary. The culmination of this transformative period came with my first professional byline in the Tribune's weekend edition. Seeing my name in print attached to a story highlighting community resilience symbolized everything I'd worked toward. The achievement belonged entirely to me, unconnected to family influence or privilege. That evening, I reread the anonymous article about family financial abandonment, recognizing how the writing had helped crystallize my perspective. What began as a deeply personal wound had evolved into a journalistic voice that could potentially help others navigating similar challenges. The pain remained, but now served a purpose beyond mere suffering. 2 years passed with remarkable speed, each semester building academic credentials and professional experience that gradually overshadowed family disappointments. My graduation from Penn State's journalism program, approached with honors distinctions and job prospects that exceeded my cautious expectations. My digital column for a major online publication had attracted a modest but dedicated following appreciative of reporting that explored societal inequities with nuance rather than simplified outrage. The work felt meaningful, connected to my personal journey while transcending it. 3 weeks before graduation, an unexpected email arrived from Dad. The subject line, "Graduation Plans," contained a brief message. "I'd like to attend your graduation ceremony if you're comfortable with that. Please let me know the details." Dad, the request triggered complex emotions. Our relationship had settled into polite distance, occasional family gatherings providing the only regular contact. He'd made no significant attempts at reconciliation, and I'd stopped expecting them, focusing instead on building my life independently. My therapist, Dr. Manning, helped navigate the decision during our regular session. "What feels right to you?" she asked after I explained the situation. "Not what others might expect, but what serves your well-being." "Part of me wants to refuse," I admitted. "Make him experience the exclusion he caused. But that feels petty and unproductive." "And the other part," she prompted, "thinks maybe allowing him to attend is the mature choice. Not for him, but for me. Showing I've moved beyond needing his approval while not actively rejecting him." Dr. Manning nodded. "Setting boundaries doesn't always mean cutting contact. Sometimes it means engaging on your terms with clear expectations and emotional protection." After careful consideration, I replied to Dad's email with graduation details and 2 reserved seats, one for him and one for his girlfriend Claire, whom I'd met briefly at Christmas. My message was polite but not effusive, setting clear parameters about the day's schedule. Graduation day arrived with perfect May-weather sunlight filtering through campus trees as families gathered to celebrate their graduates. Mom arrived early with her boyfriend Robert, their support unwavering throughout my college journey. Grandmother came too, her health more fragile, but her pride evident. Dad appeared 15 minutes before the ceremony, Claire beside him. He carried a small gift bag and looked uncharacteristically nervous, suggesting he recognized the day's significance beyond its formal purpose. "Congratulations, Miriam," he said, offering an awkward half-hug. "We're very proud of you." The plural "we" struck an odd note, as if Claire's borrowed pride could somehow supplement his historically limited supply. Still, I accepted the sentiment at face value, maintaining the day's positive energy. "Thank you for coming," I replied simply. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of speeches, name-calling, and symbolic transitions. Receiving my diploma with honors recognition, I scanned the audience briefly, noting Mom's tears, Robert's enthusiastic photographing, Grandmother's gentle smile, and Dad's attentive expression. Whatever his limitations, he was witnessing this milestone. The family lunch afterward held potential for tension, but careful seating arrangements and the public setting maintained civility. As desserts arrived, Dad cleared his throat, obviously preparing a statement he'd rehearsed. "I want to say how impressed I am with everything you've accomplished, Miriam," he began. "Your independence and determination have clearly served you well." The half apology, half self congratulation revealed his continuing blindness. In his narrative, my independence had been a choice rather than a necessity, my achievements occurring because of his approach rather than despite it. 2 years earlier, his words would have triggered hurt and anger. Now they inspired something closer to compassion for his emotional limitations. "Thank you," I replied evenly. "I've learned to rely on myself and recognize my own worth, even when others couldn't see it." The subtle boundary established, I changed the subject to safer topics. Dad seemed momentarily unsettled, but adapted, perhaps recognizing the generosity in my restraint. Later that afternoon, as family members departed, he attempted a more personal connection. "I know things haven't always been easy between us," he began, discomfort evident in his posture. "I haven't always been the father you deserved." "No, you haven't," I agreed quietly. "But I've built a good life anyway." "Your mother did an excellent job raising you," he offered, deflecting as usual. "Mom was consistently supportive," I acknowledged, "but I also made conscious choices to overcome patterns that could have limited me. That's something I'm proud of, independent of anyone else's contribution." His discomfort increased with this direct assessment. "Well, I hope we can have a better relationship moving forward." "That's possible," I replied honestly, "but it would require acknowledging past patterns, not just expressing vague hopes for the future." The conversation ended without resolution, but something had shifted. I'd spoken my truth without anger, establishing authentic terms for any potential relationship, rather than accepting convenient fictions. The week after graduation brought a job offer from the Atlantic Chronicle, a prestigious news organization known for investigative reporting. The position in their Philadelphia office offered professional advancement while remaining close enough to maintain important personal connections. The salary, while entry level, provided sufficient independence to rent a small apartment with a college friend. Moving to Philadelphia symbolized the next phase of life, one built on my terms, rather than defined by family limitations. Unpacking my modest possessions in the sun-filled bedroom of our apartment, I experienced a profound sense of accomplishment, mixed with anticipation for future possibilities. The idea for the scholarship fund came during a conversation with Dr. Reynolds, who had become a valued mentor. "Many students face similar family situations," she observed during a congratulatory dinner. "Your experience could help others navigate those challenges." Initially, the concept seemed ambitious for a recent graduate with limited resources, but partnering with the university's financial aid office and several supportive faculty members, we created the Family Gap Scholarship specifically designed for students facing parental financial abandonment despite demonstrated need. The first year's modest fund supported 2 students with small but meaningful grants. More significant than the financial assistance was the mentorship component, connecting recipients with graduates who understood their unique challenges. Serving as the primary mentor rewarded me in unexpected ways, transforming personal pain into practical support for others. Jessica and I developed an authentic relationship based on adult understanding, rather than childhood comparison. During her visit to Philadelphia, we discussed family dynamics with unprecedented honesty. "Dad still doesn't understand what he did," she observed as we walked along the riverfront. "He talks about you with pride now, as if he contributed to your success." "That's his narrative," I replied without rancor. "I have my own." "I admire how you've handled everything," she admitted. "It would have been easy to become bitter or give up." "Those options didn't serve me," I explained. "Creating my own path forward did." The healing journey wasn't linear or simple. Therapy sessions continued addressing deeper patterns of seeking validation and battling perfectionism born from childhood emotional neglect. Writing became both professional pursuit and personal processing, allowing me to transform experiences into insights. My final significant conversation with Dad occurred during Thanksgiving at Grandmother's house. Finding ourselves momentarily alone in the kitchen, he attempted another half apology wrapped in self-justification. "I know you think I favored Jessica," he began awkwardly. "Maybe I did in some ways, but it was because you seemed so capable, so self-sufficient." "I became self-sufficient because I had no choice," I replied calmly. "That wasn't a personality trait, it was a survival strategy." Something in my steady gaze prevented his usual deflection. "I failed you," he admitted finally, the first unqualified acknowledgement he'd ever offered. "Yes," I agreed simply. "You did." "Can you forgive me?" he asked, vulnerability briefly replacing his habitual defensiveness. The question required careful consideration. "I can forgive you for my own peace," I answered truthfully. "But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Trust requires consistent action over time, not just words of regret." Dad nodded slowly, perhaps truly hearing me for the first time. No dramatic reconciliation followed, but subtle shifts in his behavior suggested possible growth. Small gestures like birthday calls and occasional check-ins indicated minimal effort that, while far from compensatory at least, acknowledged my existence. The article series on family financial dynamics that won the Regional Journalism Award grew from these experiences. Without sharing specific personal details, I explored societal assumptions about parental support, legal versus moral obligations, and the psychological impact of financial favoritism. Reader response confirmed the topic's relevance beyond my individual situation. Mrs. Harmon invited me to speak at my former high school about overcoming obstacles to higher education. Standing before students who reminded me of my younger self, I offered practical advice alongside the emotional reassurance I'd once needed. "Your path may not be straight or easy," I told them, "but determination combined with self-compassion creates resilience that no external challenge can defeat." Mrs. Harmon's proud smile from the back of the classroom provided a full-circle moment of recognition. Her early belief in my potential had provided critical support when family validation was absent. The journey from betrayal to empowerment transformed more than my relationship with Dad. It fundamentally altered my understanding of family worthiness and resilience. Blood connections I'd learned guaranteed nothing beyond genetic inheritance. True family consisted of those who showed up consistently offering support, rather than conditional approval. Peace came not from receiving the validation I'd once desperately sought, but from recognizing I no longer needed it. My worth existed independently from Dad's ability to recognize it, just as my success occurred despite his limitations, rather than because of them. Looking toward the future, I felt neither bitterness about the past nor anxiety about potential repetition of harmful patterns. The cycle of favoritism and neglect that Grandmother had identified ended with my conscious choices to build different relationships based on authenticity and mutual respect. Have you ever experienced family financial favoritism? Was there a moment when you realized your worth wasn't defined by someone else's treatment? Share your journey in the comments below. Remember, healing isn't just about overcoming past hurts. It's about creating a future where those patterns can't continue. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear they aren't alone. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to empowerment. And remember, the family that truly matters is often the one we create through genuine connection, not just shared DNA.